Welcome to the Agile Wire. Brought to you by Wisconsin Agility. We want you to get agile and stay agile. Now here are your hosts, Jeff Bubolz and Chad Beier.
And we're recording. All right, kick us off, Jeff.
All right, today on the podcast we have Joanna Płoskanka, actually Dr. Joanna. She has PhD in robotics, master's degree in culture and engineering, and she's also a professional Scrum trainer with Scrum.org. So all kinds of great things that we can talk about today. So Joanna, oftentimes people are question like Agile and hardware. Do they actually work together? Is this even possible, or is it just a thing that happens in theory? And I know you've got some great experiences with some robotic companies that we wanted to dive into. So first question, does Agile and hardware actually work?
Yes, of course. Well, it can work if you do it properly.
So how do you do it properly?
Well, Chad, I believe that I don't need to teach you what does it mean, agility. Maybe we can start with Scrum, not always, not necessarily, but the whole concept of agility, yes, definitely, yes. It's a great area for experimentation. It's the great area for evidence-based management. And all the concepts, actually, that we love about Scrum, so those feedback loops, sprint review, sprint retrospective, daily Scrum, those feedback loops will also work very well when we think about hardware.
So that's actually one of the pushbacks that we get often when we talk with companies that are trying to use Agile and hardware together. It's like, well, how do you actually do hardware? Because it's so fixed in nature. How do you accelerate that feedback loop? It's just very difficult. That won't work here. That's usually what they say. And so how do you get started with that? How do you combat that type of mindset?
That's a very good start, because I would ask, what is fixed? What are your real constraints and limitations? So for me, it's like making sure that we know what is the frame, and then we will self-manage or self-organize around that frame. And indeed, there are some limitations. For instance, when I used to work with No Magic, which is a Polish robotics startup, our limitations were, for instance, types of robots that we could use, because this company does not produce big, heavy industrial robots, right? There are some providers around the world, and you order robots from them. So this is the limitation. Yes, fully agree. But guess what? You can build your own equipment by either buying existing things and connecting them. So it's like this theory of connecting dots and creating a new product out of that. But you can also, if you have mechanical engineers in your team, build your own sensors or some systems and combine it with this robot. This actually is bringing us to, you thought that your limitations are like that, but I dare to say they are like that. So you have significant space to look for improvements, and it looks like a great opportunity for agility.
Sure. When we had Joe Justice on the podcast a while back, he worked at Tesla for a while. And when they were using Agile and hardware, a lot of times they thought about it as like interfaces between different components. And those things might be fixed because of some nature that you had in place. And you'd have to replace that. And then the interfaces might change at that point. But there's a lot of flexibility in how these things work together with the software components that go into the hardware, right? And the firmware and all the things along those lines. So there is a level of rigidity and things, but there's also a lot more flexibility than what you think, and there's a way to get some feedback loops out there.
Exactly.
So do you have any stories about how you've helped get some of those feedbacks going with a startup? I mean, a startup's trying to prove really quick, like, do we have a viable product? So how did you do that?
Well, I wouldn't say anything new to you, I believe, and maybe to majority of your audience. Learn quickly. What does it mean? Look for effective ways how to experiment. Sometimes, unfortunately, when you are building something, it will take you longer, like a few weeks. to have something usable. But, so this is the problem with Scrum. If it's more than 4 weeks, oops, we are hitting the limitation that is written in the Scrum guide. But you can do instead, for instance, some prototyping that won't be usable, but according to lean product development, it might be enough to learn. And this is what we did. I remember very initial conversations or quick tests using cardboard. Wonderful. Another prototyping technique, duct tape. Amazing, right? So remember that in that case, you can definitely, or you have to postpone having usable increment, but you can have learning as quickly as possible and decide whether you want to invest more in that direction or you would pivot and change that idea completely. You use 3D printers. So it might be one time bigger investment to buy that. But again, if you have people with tools, with experience, or even just willing to learn, right? So they will learn how to print certain things, how to design, and you can cheaply print several different prototypes of similar thing and test it during 1 week. So I remember that in that company, we had regular reviews. They were not always sprint reviews because, as you can imagine, it's easier to quickly deliver software. With hardware, it takes more time. But what was wonderful, and it happened to us at least a few times, like majority of conversations were about what were the experiments conducted, what are the most important lessons, what are of metrics, product metrics we currently know, and what should be the next decision based on those things. So I believe that was powerful. Accept limitations and find the way how to maximize learnings. In case of the hardware, yes, Scrum might not be the best friend, but come on, we can get some inspirations. Hardware teams, hardware experts, they were in love in sprint retrospective. Daily Scrum was super useful, right? So there might be a lot of great things, and at the same time, you can find your way.
Yep. Yeah, I love some of the things. So there's some nuance here I want to pull out because I think too often people on the outskirts of Agile, whatever that is, they hear phrases like fail fast, and then that's all they hear. And then they kind of get confused and they're like, what? Fail fast? That doesn't sound like a good business decision. And I like how you skipped over that immediately. And you said the phrase learn quickly early on. And then you just also expanded on it saying, accept constraints, limitations, accept the constraints and limitations you have, and then, try to learn as much as possible in a short amount of time frame. Even just imagining the sprint reviews, right? Yeah. So let's say we're not doing this like by the book. We have a working product increment every single sprint. But if you meet in a sprint review and you have a conversation around, since the last time we met, what have we learned? Because a failure without learning is just a wasted opportunity and just sloppiness, right? So what have we learned since the last time we met? And what risks are around the corner that we can identify that we should start iterating through experimentation to mitigate, avoid, right? Reduce. Like if you just have those two questions answered in a sprint review, that's better than the alternative, right? Where you're like, let's put everything on paper, build a big 6 to 12 month plan, and then start the manufacturing on the hardware. And then eventually we'll get to the changeable, more malleable pieces of software. Like that's a terrible decision in 2024. Maybe some companies can pull that off because they have built up such a, large reserve of cash flow and in their product, but they're not going to be the company that remains viable as these new startup companies come and destroy them with smaller prototypes and quicker to market changes. So
yeah, I think about it as like probabilities. Nothing's determined. And so like when you have limitations, you should try to reduce the risk that you made a bad decision with one of those limitations because they're hard to change, right? So imagine, I don't know, like I remember this story from a while back about like them designing fighter jets, and they designed it for the average person. And so no one was average going in there. So like a 5'10" male with this build, and then all of a sudden that reach for this person was great. But what about when this person's 5'8" or 5'6" and they're in that same cockpit? They can't reach that. Now they're here. If they need to do this, they can't. And so there's like a higher probability of them not being able to execute whatever they need to do, and it causes these problems. So how easy would it have been in your example there to create some kind of physical prototype with cardboard, duct tape, whatever else, and try different size people in those conditions and see like, hey, can they reach these buttons? Can they do these tasks? We've heard stories over and over again of people creating like applications that are for people on like an iPad using a composite screen, but guess what? People have rubber gloves on in this field, and that doesn't work. So now you need to design a completely different interface. Like that's something you easily could have figured out way earlier on by doing some testing right with the hardware. Maybe you're in low light conditions with your hardware and you test it on full light conditions. Like you should be able to like test in the same conditions to see what actually happens, mitigate the risk that you're going to go in the wrong direction. And then once you say, I think we've done what we can, now let's start building the software to go with that. And then let's test with the real thing as we build it out. But we've done a lot before that to make sure we're making good decisions, or at least increase the probability that we've made good decisions.
Exactly.
All right, so you do that, and then how about those hardware and software? Like, you know, you got a lot of different people with different educations on these robotic teams. I got to mention, like, you got people that know AI, machine learning, and mechanical engineers, and countless other skills. Do you put them all in one team and actually have them work together? Do you keep them in separate specialist teams? Like, how were the teams designed when you were working on these robotic products?
That's a good question. And maybe I should emphasize one more point. When it comes to culture of No Magic, we always tried not to create boundaries that will be harmful. So we will try not to put ourselves into the box, right? And at the same time, people who are cross-functional as an individual and willing to learn, to expand their abilities, also abilities to collaborate with others, they were very, very appreciated there. So No Magic, I believe it's a part of luck, but it's also a part of their recruitment process and how much effort they were putting into that. They were able to hire some of the experts that were having knowledge about robotics and were amazing programmers at the same time. Programmers in the sense of deep understanding of DevOps. So it's not like I code it and now you test, right? It's like taking full responsibility for their work. They were great in connecting some of the people because obviously not everyone was like that. So mechanical engineers, when they were prototyping something, creating new grippers or ideas how to change gripper effectively, because imagine the problem. Maybe I should start with establishing what was the problem and why all those skills were needed. There is a warehouse, right? Big warehouse. Imagine companies selling different clothing, different electronic equipment. There are thousands of different items there, and you want robot to be able to pick at least 95, maybe even more % of those items without damage and doing it correctly. So for us, it will be like, and repeat a lot every day. But what happened was a great system of recognizing item, assessing the item, sometimes choosing the right gripper, choosing the right force, also sending information to the server that is managing the system. So it's a lot of things to combine. That's why even if in some of the cases, hardware engineers were working closer and they were in their lab, right, in their dirty place, right, of the office, and software developers were in the other, they were still collaborating a lot. What I loved when I was working there, coming to the office is always great. Why? because you can go to the robot, say like, hey, there, how are you? But also you can help someone to conduct some test, challenge him or her, collaborate, right? And that was amazing. So sometimes we had some boundaries, but they were always like, we were expected to solve problems. And that was helping to create situations like in that company, that's for me, it's like amazing example. I have observed continuous flow of learning in the hardware company. How did it happen? Morning, let's do a mini planning. What we can try to achieve? Well, we have to test this new solution for the creeper. Okay, software engineer talk to hardware engineer, and after 2-3 hours they meet. There is already a prototype done by hardware engineer, dirty solution but quick. Software engineer coded it sufficiently. They together integrated on the real robot in the lab. Let's go. Okay, looks good. Here it's a problem. Okay, ideas for improvement. Okay, we meet in 2 hours? Yes, we meet in 2 hours. And they are back, in 2 hours. Continuous flow, hardware plus software working together.
Yeah. So often I think that we think we can analyze our way into the future, and we just can't, right? Like there's kind of a certain level of humility that we need when we're building products, and even more as things get more sophisticated with robotics, AI, machine learning, all the stuff that people are doing. Feedback loops are king. Like I just think that you got to get people working together and towards that common goal, and test and learn through doing. You're going to learn so much through action than you are through thinking about the problem over and over and over again and talking about it. So it's the same stuff. It's just a little different application of it. But it's the same first principles that work over and over again.
Yeah.
It's really, you're reminding me of when I worked for a large company that ships a lot of packages around the world. And we had our corporate headquarters at the time attached to one of the sortation facilities. So basically all the packages come in that region. And the cool part of that was that when you were talking about a change to make to some of the package scanning software, the weights, the dimension, all the things that try to automatically move a package through a hub and get it out onto a truck. And there's humans involved too. But just you could walk out on the floor and watch what's happening and go do an observational study and talk to a real user who has a ring scanner on their hand and who has a hip printer attached to them. And you could work through like, this is how they're working right now today. How can we make their life better? But the problem was, right, we were trying to be as agile as possible. This was decades ago. But we still were in this mindset of sort of gather the requirements and let's document the best solution for them instead of taking the mindset of what's the next best solution for them and providing a small piece of the next best thing, right? Because if like Jeff just said, analysis versus feedback mindset, if your company you work for has an analysis mindset, you're going to try to find the next best, find the best solution. You're going to try to document, this is exactly what we need to do. Losing sight of the fact that like after that 6 to 12 month project, now you're just going to have to find it all over again. Instead, embrace the fact that no, we have to make these micro changes all the time, and the value can be realized so much faster, right? I mean, this is just one of those moments where I wish I could have a time machine and go back and tell my younger self, like, you're doing it wrong, right? And maybe I knew at the time too, because this was also a company I could sort of started a little Agile Revolution at. But yeah, like if you knew then what you knew now, so many mistakes could have been avoided, right? So much time lost on those big analysis efforts. Groups of human beings trying to predict the future and document it. Like, how silly is that?
Chad, there is such a saying, if you are thinking about your past self and you feel like, I wish I could, it's a sign of very positive thing. It means that you have become a better version of yourself.
Oh, good for me then. Yes, I'm becoming a better version of myself.
Exactly. Because
Yeah.
if you don't have these feelings, it may be a sign that you haven't faced difficulties, uncomfortable situations that pushed you to learn, to challenge your thinking, and to become a better person. But now I feel,
love
looking at you, you did this path. Congratulations! Keep on doing. Good job.
Yeah, and now, I think this is what companies and organizations around the planet need to hear, right? They need to, if they were living, breathing organisms, they need to be thinking about how do we become the next better version of ourselves instead of be the best in the industry, or what are the best practices we should be focusing on? No. What are the emergent practices that you need to be focusing on to become a better version of yourself? I think the phrase continuous improvement is thrown around too loosely around the world. How's that? And I think it's really time organizations wake up and look in the mirror and realize that. Like, it's back to the fail fast versus learn quickly. The fail fast companies are like, they're not moving anywhere. They're not going anywhere. But learn quickly, they've already acknowledged the fact that they have some serious level of improvement baked into their DNA, into their culture. And we need more of that around the world. So I don't know. I love talking about this topic because I know there's going to be someone out there who has said that phrase before listening to this. Hardware isn't malleable enough like software. All that agile stuff, that started in software and it works there, but it really doesn't work outside of that. Well, newsflash, it's 2024, and yeah, these things aren't software. They originated in software, but feedback loops, like improving based on things that you're learning, that's like an age-old, there's nothing new there. It works. It's effective. So I love this. I love talking about maybe dispelling some of the, disproving some of the myths that are out there around Agile and hardware.
Mm-hmm. I think when you add those feedback loops like we were talking about, you start eliminating non-value add in a lean context, steps where you're doing all this talking and documenting and creating designs and things like that. And you do a minimal amount of that, or you at least reduce it, and you spend a lot more time on the value add items of actually doing the work to get the stuff done, and then testing to see, did we make the right stuff? We might make some more mistakes, but even if we're 70% of the way there, like, we're gonna learn so much faster than doing those designs and talk. And it's kind of like playing a sport. Like when you play a sport and you get a win, or you make that basket, or you get that thing, it motivates you to do the next thing and the next thing. And like, there's like an energy that comes from that, from all those teams working together. And it just, the engagement, the happiness, like it's good for the employee. It's good for the employer. It's good for the market. It's good for society. Like, there's wins everywhere when this starts to happen. So, I just wish everybody could find a company to work for, or a product to work on that's like that. Because once you do it, that's all you're ever going to want to work on. You're not going to want to work on things the old way.
Joanna, what would you tell your younger self? Within the bounds of the topic we're talking about.
Yeah.
Or you can answer it however you want, I guess. But I don't want to make it too broad.
Actually, I feel like I already maybe indirectly incorporated this piece of advice for myself. Don't be afraid to learn, and that's why I'm trying to avoid those words: failure, mistake. And even if you say mistake, for me, mistake, if connected with learning loop, it's a really good place to be in, because it means that I'm learning and I'm moving forward along my learning curve. So I would say myself, don't be afraid to move along that curve, no matter what. Sometimes you will learn just like that, but there will be the moment one day when you will be like, with, for yourself, because those previous efforts will pay off.
Yeah. Awesome. Anything you want to plug? This is your opportunity to plug anything, talk about, I don't know.
Well, actually, yes, I do, if I may. And I believe that it might be also important for those people listening to us, and they will, after that, maybe someone will say like, oh, Joanna work in Poland with some Polish startup, so it does not work for us because hardware, blah, blah, blah. I want to add to this blah, blah, blah that it all was connected with, for me, the basis of agility. Right people, yes. Right culture, yes. And at the same time, Agile Manifesto starts with people and interactions, right? So I have to say that the quality of interactions at No Magic were one of the best that I've ever seen. So people were not afraid to have a quarrel. Sometimes it was tough, but I believe those conflicts were making us better version of ourselves. People were open for having a lot of conversations, and this idea of collaborating and achieving common goals was super, super important there. So please, if you are listening to us, please remember that this ingredient, no matter what is your domain, is important. So quality of our interactions will most likely affect the quality and value of the product that you're working on.
Love it.
Love it. And you have a great podcast. How do people find you?
Well, it's a good question whether it's a podcast or any other variation, but you can find me on YouTube, Scrum with Dr. Joanna, because you already know I have a PhD in robotics. And hopefully you can find chat soon. We are going to sing songs. So if you want not so serious topics, you can also find it there. So yeah.
Cool. Awesome. We'll leave links to everything in the description. But yeah, thanks for the chat today. This was fun. It was good chatting again because I know you and I just chatted recently. Yeah, good luck with all the learning that we're all going to do. I think it's important.
Yes, definitely. Good luck for us, all of us.
All right. Thanks, Joanna.
Thank you very much.
If you found value in today's episode, share this with a friend. Until next time, get agile and stay agile.